What's going on, everybody? Welcome into episode 142 of the MudWatch Sports Podcast on this Thursday, February 19, 2026. I'm your host, Zach Malum. But before we get started, please subscribe below. Follow all of my social accounts. Let's start things off in the world of basketball as the New York Knicks are back in action after a long All-Star break. They host the Detroit Pistons tonight at MSG, and we'll get to that in just a minute. But right now, the Knicks sit in third place in the Eastern Conference, 6 games back of first place Detroit and a half game back of second place Boston. Knicks are 35-20 on the season, but the huge disparity between home and road games has really been a difference maker for this Knicks team throughout this season. 21-7 when they play at Madison Square Garden, but just 13-13 on the road this season. That is abysmal compared to the rest of the teams around them in the Eastern Conference. When you look at the rest of the teams, I mean, Boston 17-10 away from home. Detroit, obviously the best record in the Eastern Conference, 18-7 when they go away from home. And I think even the teams below them in Cleveland, the Raptors, Philly are all solid teams, 5-6 games above 500 on the road. So the Knicks need to pick up their mentality when they go up against a tough team on the road. I know they've won some tough games on the road recently. They had that huge win just before the All-Star break against the Philadelphia 76ers, an absolute rout in that game. Just a week earlier than that, they ended up taking down Boston at TD Garden. So they have some tough wins on the road, but I think consistently down the stretch, they have to really pick things up away from home and not just rely on Madison Square Garden to be their savior, because when they do get on their home floor, they are a different team, and with that home crowd, they really get it going at MSG. But they have to really focus on their road games and winning games on the road, because when it comes to postseason time, they face off against Detroit and Boston and some of those other tougher teams. It's going to be hard to go on the road after you've been struggling all season long when you're not at home. So I think when you look at it, the Knicks really need to pick that up. The other thing that a lot of people are talking about in terms of the Knicks, you would say, is defense, and they have to pick up their defense. I think the Knicks are in a real solid spot right now. Of course, they could always improve on that point, but when you look at it from a statistical standpoint, they are really good in terms of defense. I mean, third place right now in the Eastern Conference in terms of opponent points per game. The only teams ahead of them, Detroit and Boston. But really the thing that stands out for the Knicks is they score more than both Detroit and Boston so far this season in terms of points per game. So that's a real positive sign for this Knicks team, is that their defense looks bad on paper and it looks bad sometimes during games. They just need a little bit of improvement, and they will be just fine when it comes postseason time. Just a couple points per game, shave it off, and they would be okay heading down the stretch into the postseason. But the Knicks are red hot right now. When you look at it before the All-Star break, 8 of their last 10 they've won, including that rout just before it, like I mentioned, against Philadelphia. But it all comes down to now tonight, where really a lot of the expectations based on this season, you're really going to see them as the Knicks host the Detroit Pistons, the 40-13 Pistons versus the 35-20 Knicks. A 7:30 start at Madison Square Garden, and the Knicks come into this game as 4.5-point favorites, total sitting at 221.5. And coming home once again in front of the home crowd, get them behind you. The Pistons on the other side are dealing with some suspension. Obviously, Isaiah Stewart, not really too much of an impact there, but Jalen Duren out due to a suspension, and he's going to miss this one tonight. That's a huge loss for Detroit as their big down low, who's been so solid this year. On the Knicks side, they have OG Anunoby, who's a game-time decision for New York in this one. I think really this will tell you the story in the Eastern Conference. If the Knicks beat the Pistons tonight, the Eastern Conference is really back on. And I know you can't take too much of the regular season and throw it into what it's going to play out like in the playoffs, but I think really when you look at it, if Detroit beats the Knicks all 3 times this season, twice at home and once on the road, then you got a real problem if you're this Knicks team. You got to figure it out. I think that's going to be a very worrying sign, but the Knicks really hold it in their hands. The third time that these teams will meet this season. Both times Detroit won in blowouts, 121-90 on January 5th and 118-80 on February 6th. So the Knicks really have the story in their hands. Will it be a solid run in the postseason, or will it be all Detroit Pistons? We'll find out, really. A slight preview tonight as the Knicks host the Pistons. Let's finish things off today, staying in the world of basketball, but shifting things to the college game as number 17 St. John's took on Marquette on Wednesday evening. A tough trip up to Milwaukee, but St. John's answers the call, and Marquette, even though they're one of the worst teams, the worst team actually by record in the Big East Conference so far this season, still not an easy game at Fiserv Forum, and St. John's passes the test 76-70. They win this one behind 23 points from their star forward in Bryce Hopkins, 8 of 14 shooting, 6 of 7 from the free throw line. He also had a three-pointer in the game, but he also added 10 rebounds and an assist along with a steal. Very huge bounce back by Bryce Hopkins, who had a very rough game on the road at Providence on the weekend, and he really bounces back strong, while Zuby Ejiofor really struggled in this one. Only 3 of 10 shooting from the field, 10 points on the day, but he does the little things. 6 rebounds, 2 assists, a steal, 3 blocks. Even when he's not having a great day scoring-wise, he does the little things outside of that, and give credit to Zuby Ejiofor, who had a solid stat line on the day. The weirdest stat line on the day goes to Dylan Mitchell, who had 0 points, 0 field goal attempts on the day. Had a couple of missed free throws and went 0 for 2 from the line, but had 7 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 steals on the evening, and that's really what you get from Dylan Mitchell. I mentioned it with Zuby Ejiofor, the little things that he does. Dylan Mitchell does all of those things and more, and I think that's a real positive sign for the Johnnies. Even if he doesn't score and he doesn't want to score, he's doing a lot of other things in 30 minutes of game time that helps St. John's down the stretch to win games. And I think that really stood out for them. They got some other contributions from Isaiah Sellers, who came off the bench, 12 points on the evening, 4 of 8 shooting with 2 3-pointers and a couple of rebounds. And I think when you look at it, St. John's did not shoot the ball well in this game. Marquette kept it close down the stretch, but St. John's does a good job of holding on. Just holding on and getting to the finish line, and that's a real positive sign for the Johnnies as they head closer to March. The biggest story of the day wasn't even in this St. John's Marquette game. It was out at UConn as the Huskies go down to Creighton in a massive upset. Unranked Creighton take down number 5 UConn out in Hartford, 91-84 the final. They got 21 points in the 21 points on the day from Josh Dix, and 13 of his 21 it came in the second half. Just a phenomenal game by him. Nick Graves also added 18 points. Just a phenomenal game overall by Creighton, and a massive upset in terms of the Big East standings, as right now St. John's sits in first place in the Big East. They are a game ahead of UConn, who they also beat just a couple of weeks ago at Madison Square Garden. A huge win for St. John's in both this game against Marquette as well as the win that Creighton got against UConn yesterday. When you look at it, though, St. John's still has a tough test. They have to take on Creighton this weekend, and then the game after that, it's not going to be easy as they take on UConn out in Hartford. A very tough game for the Red Storm, and it's going to be the biggest game of St. John's season, in my opinion. Even bigger than the game that they played at Madison Square Garden, where they beat UConn in a very close game there. But I think this is going to be a very tough race down the stretch. If St. John's can continue to rack up wins against the lesser opponents, they will end up winning the Big East. That's really what it comes down to, because UConn showed a couple of shakiness, and I think that's going to be something to look at down the stretch. I think really when you look at it, though, Creighton did a good job of making shots in this game. and UConn did not. Creighton is not a great shooting team overall so far this season, but they have a lot of guys who can score, and that's really been Creighton's MO year after year. They can score at will on offense. They just lost a lot of their star players from last year, so not an easy game for UConn in that one, and they go down to Creighton. I think when you look at it, though, it's not going to be easy this weekend as Creighton comes to MSG, and number 17, St. John's host Creighton February 21st. That is Saturday. It's a noon start at Madison Square Garden. 14-13 Creighton are on the year, 8-8 in Big East play. St. John's 21-5 on the season, 14-1 in Big East play. Really what it's going to come down to is St. John's work on the defensive side of the ball. Do not allow Creighton to really rack up points like they did in that UConn game. That's going to be the difference for St. John's. Defense has to be strong, and they will host Creighton at Madison Square Garden. What a game it will be, as it's a 12 o'clock start on Saturday. Make sure you tune in as the Red Storm continue to roll on first place in the Big East for now, and they host Creighton on Saturday at Madison Square Garden. But that will do it for episode 142 of the MudWatch Sports Podcast. Please subscribe below. I've been Zach Malum, but thanks for watching, and talk to you all on Tuesday.